Good afternoon and welcome to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors meeting for today, Tuesday, July 17th, 2007. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Alioto-Pierre? Alioto-Pierre present. Supervisor Ramiano?
Here.
Ramiano present. Supervisor Daly?
Present.
Daly present. Supervisor Dufty? Dufty present. Supervisor Ellsburn? Ellsburn present. Supervisor Jew?
Here.
Jew present. Supervisor Maxwell? Maxwell present. Supervisor McGoldrick? McGoldrick present. Supervisor Mirkarimi? There is a Mirkarimi present. Excuse me. There is a quorum, Mr. President. Excuse me. Supervisor Peskin?
Present.
Supervisor Peskin present. Supervisor Sandoval? Sandoval present. There is a quorum, Mr. President.
Would you all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation.
indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Liberty and justice for all.
Colleagues, can we have a motion to approve the board meeting minutes for June 5th, June 12th, and the special Board of Supervisors meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee for June 6, 2007, made by Supervisor Amiano, second by Supervisor Dufty. Without objection, the motion is approved. Madam Clerk, would you please read the next item?
The consent agenda consists of items 1 through 3. All matters listed here are considered to be routine by the Board of Supervisors and will be acted upon by a single roll call vote of the Board. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a member of the Board so requests, in which event the matter shall be removed from the consent agenda and considered as a separate item.
Would any member like an item or items severed from the consent agenda? Supervisor Daly? No. All right, then on those items, a roll call, please.
Supervisor Peskin?
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Sandoval? Aye. Sandoval, aye. Supervisor Alioto-Pierre? Aye. Alioto-Pierre, aye. Supervisor Ramiano?
Aye.
Ramiano, aye. Supervisor Daly?
Aye.
Daly, aye. Supervisor Dufty? Aye. Dufty, aye. Supervisor Ellsburn? Ellsburn, aye. Supervisor Jew? Jew, aye. Supervisor Maxwell?
Aye.
Maxwell, aye. Supervisor McGoldrick? McGoldrick, aye. Supervisor Mirkarimi?
Aye.
Mirkarimi, aye. On the consent agenda, there are 11 ayes.
Those ordinances are finally passed. Madam Clerk, would you read items 4 and 5 together?
Item 4 is the consolidated budget and annual appropriation ordinance appropriating all estimate receipts and estimated expenditures for the city and county of San Francisco for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2008. Item 5 is the consolidated annual salary ordinance enumerating positions in the annual budget and appropriation ordinance for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2008.
Thank you. I'm going to recognize the chair of the committee, Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colleagues, today we take our first vote on the city's proposed 2007-2008 annual appropriations and salary ordinance for the coming fiscal year. I want to thank my fellow members of the Budget and Finance Committee, Supervisors Amiano, Dufty, Ellsburn, and Mirkarimi, and say that I am very pleased to present to you the results of our deliberations. The committee's total recommended general fund budget reappropriations of $21,942,583 represents the largest general fund budget reappropriations ever made by the Board of Supervisors from the Mayor's proposed budget. At the same time, I think we are all proud that we've been able to make these reductions without affecting service level reductions. Although those deliberations were shorter this year than is customary, I believe the product, just as every year since this district-elected Board of Supervisors has been in charge, reflects our commitments to supporting San Francisco's most vulnerable residents, the poor, the elderly, the young, and the disabled. All of you who've been around these chambers for a while know that the budget is an ever-evolving and living document, and the process is definitely not a perfect one, but the best one we have. And as our controller and budget analyst and the budget staff will tell you, there are a lot of line items in a $6 billion budget. But I think with a few changes that I will propose today, we should be able to pass a document which all of us and the citizens of San Francisco can and should be proud of, and that adequately express the priorities of this Board of Supervisors. I have a number of technical changes that many of you have expressed to my office, which are in the hands of the controller, and then some more substantive financial reappropriations from within the add-backs that the Board of Supervisors worked with. Let me go over the technical ones first. They do not affect the budget monetarily. One is a transfer from the Department of Human Services to the Department of Children, Youth, and Families for 2 line items that are better suited to be at DCYF. Those are Asian Family Response Network and the Family Support Service line items. Transfer from the Department of Public Health also to DCYF for the SRO Outreach Family Support. A transfer from the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice also to the Department of Children, Youth, and Families for violence prevention in Bernal Heights, crime prevention in the Western Addition, summer youth and art apprenticeships. A transfer from DCYF back to the Department of Public Health for homeless women harm reduction in the Mission. Transfer from the Administrative Services Department to the Mayor's Office of Community Development for the Bernal neighborhood for a Bernal neighborhood site acquisition. The Department of Public Health splitting the methadone treatment for homeless women in the Tenderloin to 2 uses, methadone treatment for homeless women, BART programs, and medical services for homeless in the Mission. A reserve at the Department of City Planning in the amount of $80,000 for environmental review of the Western Soma Citizens Planning Task Force Plan. From MOCD to DPH, increasing allocation and transferring Immigration Community Response Network legal services, increasing the allocation and transferring it to DPH. Another shift from admin to DPH, decreasing allocation and transferring collaboration for sanctuary outreach and education. A transfer from Human Services to DPH for hygiene funding for shelters. The Public Utilities Commission putting on reserve $40,000 for Conservation Park Design Project on a committee reserve, and planning placing on reserve $250,000 for historic survey work. And then as to the substantive monetary changes, a reduction in the amount of $1 million to fill cuts to drop-in shelter services at the Department of Public Health, and that would be a reduction from the affordable family rental housing line item that was in the amount of $10 million. This would reduce it to $9 million, a further reduction of the remaining $9 million by $380,000 to fund additional programs at the Department of Aging and Adult Services and the Department of Public Health to deal with elderly eviction defense and pedestrian safety improvements. And finally, an additional $100,000 reduction from a capital item for tunnel repair of the Broadway Tunnel, which is currently at $528,000, to reduce that line item to $428,000 for additional $100,000 for SRO Families United increase. I would like to move those technical and substantive amendments to the budget. I thank you all for your participation in the process and look forward to working with you to implement the priorities of the City and County of San Francisco.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. That amendment is moved and seconded by Supervisor Ellsburn. Supervisor Daley.
My comments aren't to the amendment, but I'd love to see a copy of it.
Supervisor Daley, while you're looking at those amendments, would you like me to go to Supervisor Dufty? Supervisor Dufty.
No, that was you.
Supervisor Amiano.
Okay. I want to thank the members of the committee, the academy, I was going to say. And I know it's been kind of a bumpy year. I do want to thank Supervisor Daley for his input and role as a catalyst, and I do want to also thank Supervisor Peskin for stepping in. It doesn't mean I agree 100% with both of them, but credit should be given to both those gentlemen and I do believe that. One of the things that I'm very concerned about is services to the homeless. As you know, we have the HOT program. I expressed some reserve about the HOT program. I still have those concerns, but it is my sense of the board from public statements made that taking a little money from them, a subvention, I think it's called in Sacramento, would not pass the sniff test today. But it's very imperative that we do support programs that provide 24-hour shelters. As a matter of fact, given Care Not Cash and all the hoopla, it's counterintuitive that we don't have 24-hour services. When you're homeless, you're not on a workday clock. Unfortunately, these services are dwindling, even though they are often the only option for many homeless people and individuals to take a shower, to get counseling, or a service referral. I know Ms. Guzman and Ledbetter on 16th and Mission there are doing a yeoman's job, with not as many resources as they want. And if Buster's Place or others close, it's going to impact that. You're also going to see more people on the street. I thought the idea was to not have as many people on the street. So the funding for this, I think, speaks to itself. And these shelter services are often a gateway to housing and service referral. And I know we will get numerous calls about that. So to cut to the chase, I do want to make a motion to amend number 4 and reluctantly, but out of necessity, I want to move that we reduce the affordable housing, the affordable family rental housing by $1 million and make those funds available to 24-hour drop-in homeless shelter services, particularly Buster's Place. And if there needs to be an RFP process, I'll leave it up to the DPH. But we cannot close this budget without addressing this crucial need. So that's my motion.
Supervisor Amiano, could you restate that motion? My apologies.
Sure. Make a motion to amend item number 4, the annual appropriations ordinance, to reduce affordable family rental housing by $1 million and make those funds available for 24-hour drop-in homeless shelter services.
Supervisor Amiano, that motion was made by myself and already seconded and is before the board.
Okay. All right. So now we got 2.
It's the same.
All right.
It's the same motion. So we can vote on it twice, but that motion's on the floor.
No, not at all. That's fine. We'll let yours stand then.
Supervisor Daley? Okay, Supervisor McGoldrick to the motion. So why don't we do the process like this? We will speak to the motion that is before us and then vote on that motion, and then if there are other motions, take those in the order that they are presented. Supervisor McGoldrick, not to the motion?
No, I'll fourth that motion, but I have another motion. Thank you.
Okay, so on the motion made and seconded to do the technical changes that were presented to the board as well as the financial changes, and let me reiterate what those are. Again, that was to take $1 million from the affordable family rental housing add back for a 24-hour drop-in shelter, commonly known as Buster's Place, to reduce the remaining $9 million for affordable housing by an additional $380,000 for the Department of Aging and Adult Services and the Department of Public Health to deal with eviction defense for elderly and pedestrian safety improvements for seniors, and to reduce a capital project for Broadway tunnel repair from $528,000 to $428,000 and appropriate the $100,000 to SRO families. On that motion, colleagues, can we do that same house, same call? The motion is approved. New motion, Supervisor Daley.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President. And colleagues, I'd like to talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room, if you will, that being the influence of the mayoral politics, and specifically that of the Gavin Newsom campaign in this year's budget. Colleagues, you recall that the Tuesday before the week before I was removed from chair of the Budget Committee, there were competing rallies scheduled out in front of City Hall. I ended up canceling the one that I organized or postponing it until the following week. And it was a good rally for those who didn't make it, probably a few more than 500 people at the rally, calling for a people's budget in San Francisco. And I do want to thank all of the members of the People's Budget Collaborative, and in particular my staff, John Avalos, for basically organizing an amazing process for coming up with a true people's budget that this Board of Supervisors just couldn't find the resolve to adopt in the face of stiff political winds, in my opinion, in the face of bullying tactics from the Gavin Newsom campaign, and perhaps I've sent a letter over to the Ethics Commission. I think the law is good on this, probably illegal campaigning, or actually illegal use of campaign funds for office holder expenses, which you can do after you're elected, but not in the cycle that you're running. At least that's my reading of the law, and we'll find out in the coming months what ethics decides to do with the complaint that I filed against the Newsom re-election campaign. But let's be honest, colleagues, I know that this is not going to be comfortable, and I didn't come here to the Board of Supervisors to make colleagues comfortable. I think it was Victor Miller from the New Mission News who wrote under the banner that we are to comfort the afflicted while we afflict the comfortable. And I'll take the banner from the old New Mission News and the late, great Victor Miller, and I will afflict the comfortable, even though I guess it's not collegial. And perhaps there are some who believe that you shouldn't do it. But in a budget where there are new expenditures, originally $750,000 programmed, reduced to $500,000 by the Committee for a new, quote-unquote, community justice center to deal with quality of life issues in the central city of San Francisco, even though we found out subsequently it's probably not even legal to do, and there's no plan to implement it. In that same budget, the only 24-hour drop-in center for homeless people, eliminated. Colleagues, this is politics over policy. This is afflicting the afflicted. This is comforting the comfortable. And I believe that in the people's branch of government in San Francisco, that San Franciscans deserve better, and particularly San Franciscans who are the most vulnerable or the least among us, because, colleagues, you know there are neighbors of ours, friends and relatives who rely on the services of this city to simply live. Yes, the city is bigger than just the basic health and human services that we provide, and there are other city responsibilities. And colleagues, when I introduced a motion, which is similar to a motion that I will introduce when I'm done speaking here in a minute, I was chastised, lambasted, ultimately removed from the committee because apparently I wasn't supposed to do it. It wasn't the appropriate time in the process, even though that motion then would have provided for an enormous amount of public comment, obviously received a great deal of scrutiny, and the motion I'll introduce now, which is very, very similar, will get no public comment. May get some scrutiny from my friends over there in the corporate press tomorrow, and that's fine. But apparently this is how we're supposed to do it, so this is the way I do it. I don't know if you've noticed, but I've moved my blog off of the City Hall servers onto an independent site, but I think the blog I wrote last night I can read because it doesn't politic, and it's all about this item here today. President Aaron Peskin promised a no-drama budget after removing me from my chair in the board's Budget and Finance Committee, but I'm afraid, colleagues, the document that's in front of us may be better described as a no-compassion budget instead. Despite my record of balancing difficult budgets as chair of the Budget Committee, including the 2003 budget with the record deficit in the history of San Francisco that we closed, and still protected the most vulnerable. Despite my efforts in 2 previous cycles, President Peskin ducked for cover from the possibly illegal bullying of the Newsom re-election campaign. After removing me and installing himself as chair, I watched as the committee split the difference on nearly every contentious issue that the committee addressed. In the process, I believe the item in front of us leaves the least among us vulnerable to Newsom's draconian service cuts and has watered down our best efforts against the economic cleansing of the city. The committee left in place $22 million. That number is larger now, with the passage of that last motion. But the committee left in place $22 million in cuts to affordable housing appropriated by the Board of Supervisors only months ago. This is the single largest programmatic reduction in the history of the city. The committee recommended the closure of Buster's Place, which hopefully it looks like we may be turning around, the city's only 24-hour resource center for homeless people. They also left intact the closure of 14 psychiatric beds at San Francisco General Hospital for the acutely mentally ill, cuts to public health nurses again, and cuts to various other community programs. While I was able to address Newsom's proposed, in my opinion, hypocritical health cuts at the Bielenson hearing a few weeks ago, today marks the first opportunity for all the members of the Board of Supervisors to weigh in formally on this budget. This budget contains tens of millions of dollars in new spending for streets, police, and Newsom's pet projects that you can find featured prominently on his campaign website. All items that could be reappropriated by us to meet the basic needs of those who rely on the services we provide. Before voting on the budget, I ask a few simple questions. Should we be sinking new dollars into roads increasingly traveled by SUVs instead of building more affordable housing for families, for working class families who would otherwise be forced out of the city? Should we appropriate new monies for quality of life court while closing our only 24-hour center for homeless people? Should we be hiring additional police officers while we are firing public health nurses? The answer should be crystal clear to any San Francisco progressive. I hope you, my colleagues, stand up to Newsom's bullies and stand up for progressive San Francisco values. Colleagues, there has been a significant misinformation and disinformation, and I would actually go as far as saying a campaign of lies and deceit that has been waged against me and I believe against this august body by political forces that I believe are evil. This campaign has made it seem as if I have proposed making cuts, service cuts, in police and streets and trees and the like. Colleagues, you can ask the controller behind me. That is not true. I did propose eliminating the increases to those programs to pay for priorities that I feel are more important priorities, to take care of people and constituencies that I feel need our help more. But I did not propose cuts, programmatic cuts and line items from year to year. That is just simply untrue and was just part of the smear job done on me and on the people who rely on the services of San Francisco to live, to simply live. Colleagues, I would move, and I'm prepared to make alternate motions to find a formula that works for majority colleagues. And yes, this would most appropriately have been done in committee, but colleagues, it was not provided for. The process did not provide for this to be done in committee, although that was my intent initially. Colleagues, you may know that I did go to colleagues on the committee, not to Supervisor Ellsburn, who I respect, who I assume will be opposing this, but to Supervisor Dufty. My staff went to Supervisor Mercarimi, talking about ways in which we could move priorities or amend the proposed source side of my motion to fund the youth side. But the response, as far as I can tell, at least from Supervisor Duffy, was he was not interested in amendments to the motion, which is his druthers. I think that, colleagues, it's the wrong thing to do, and folks are going to have to deal with their own consciences on this, and that's up to them. But in front of you, I have proposed reductions and proposed restorations. I realize that with the new motion, there needs to be some amendments to this. But let me go ahead and read it as it is, and then let me tell you what I think, how it needs to be changed given the amended budget that's now in front of us. To reduce, so on the source side, $500,000 from the Community Justice Center, $2,400,000 from the Police Department for an academy class, to $2.1 million from DPW for the community corridor street cleanup, $375,000 for street improvements related to the bids, $2,884,192 from DPW sidewalk program, $6,353,435 from DPW street resurfacing program, $1,680,000 from DPW's pothole repair, $900,000 I guess for the pre-development work of the Hall of Justice rebuild, $400,000 from the Department of Telecommunications, shot spotters, $1,012,373 from General Services for 311 operators, $500,000 from General City responsibility for the retiree health care reserve, $150,000 from the Treasurer Tax Collector for the Business Assistance Center, and $5 million from General City responsibility for HOPE SF, $1 million from the General Fund Reserve. On the source side, colleagues, I propose in this motion $10 million for the acquisition, rehabilitation, construction of housing for families of seniors, people with disabilities, $4 million for repairs in Housing Authority buildings, $700,000 for services for Housing Authority tenants, $2.5 million for limited equity partnerships and community land trusts, $4 million for the DOUBT program, $1.3 million for Buster's Place, $1.3 million for the psych emergency beds at the General Hospital, $700,000 for chronic care, public health nurses, $1 million for the Soma Family Resource, $100,000 for the Soma Family Resource Center, $100,000 for the Family SRO Collaborative, $75,000 for after-school leadership development for youth 8 to 14 in Soma, $200,000 for senior services relating to mental health for hoarders and clutterers, $280,000 for pedestrian safety. My understanding is that this technically, I guess, would need to be amended to account for the previous motion. My reading of it is that basically we would move the $1,380,000 back into affordable housing from the pedestrian safety and from the Buster's Place. The monies that came from the Broadway Tunnel, I guess, could go back to the Broadway Tunnel as we would have other sources. I think that probably would cover the corrections. If the controller was following that, I don't know. I'll make that as a motion.
There is a motion made by Supervisor Daley. Is there a second for that motion? And it appears to die for lack of a second, but if I can come down for a moment and just speak to the budget generally and address some of the comments that you've made. Supervisor Sandoval, I'm going to use your position.
I have some other motions I can make. Perhaps find a second.
Let me make that statement, and then you can continue with additional motions. Colleagues, let me address the budget process in general. When you're running a municipal corporation, there are an endless number of needs and a limited number of resources. And year in and year out, we collectively, in conjunction with the mayor's office, exercise our best judgment in order to balance those needs. I think regardless of whether SUVs drive down our streets The reality is, so do our buses and so do bicycles. And the budget fundamentally is a set of trade-offs and tough decisions. Having said that, I want to say that the work that we did this year that was less dramatic than in any other year yielded the highest dollar amount of reappropriations, over $35 million, topping former chairman's record last year, Supervisor Daley. Let me address a few of the things that the supervisor brought up, because I think they're very important, because they actually received very serious consideration in our deliberations. The reason that Buster's Place was not funded was because at the 11th hour, in the late days of June, they were losing their lease, and they made it very clear to members of the committee that they were not able to negotiate an extension of that lease. Subsequently, after the committee finished its deliberations, it turned out that they were able to extend their lease, that they have been able to identify other sites, and that is precisely why I stood up earlier to restore that funding. But at the time, we had, as I said, an endless amount of need, a limited amount of resources, and I believe in the committee's judgment, it made more sense to spend that $1 million on other programs that we knew were going to be realized. Since that time, we have seen that indeed Buster's Place will live to provide important services for another year, and that is precisely why I made the motion today to come up with $1 million for that. With regard to the site beds, clearly a controversial and contentious issue that are funded in the budget that sits before you for half of the year. This is not so much a fiscal issue as it is an issue of medical policy. And it is a question as to whether or not you believe that acute diversion beds outside of the general hospital in the number of 14 beds, while there's still some 80 beds that will be left at the general, is the correct medical policy. Speaking as one supervisor, I thought it was an experiment worth undertaking. After talking to Dr. Katz at the Department of Public Health, after talking to Steve Fields at the Progress Foundation, I personally came to that conclusion, but ultimately that decision rests in this body amongst the 11 of us. I absolutely agree with Supervisor Daley that the budget that was handed to us, and we talked about this, and I think I've been very candid about it in committee, I've been very candid about it in the press, had a number of draconian cuts that really should not have been proposed in a fiscally sound year. I said in committee, I have said to the mayor, that the notion of cutting back over $8 million in previous appropriations that have been made for the past 2 fiscal years was unconscionable. It's not something that we should have had to restore, but we restored those cuts. We restored $4 million in AIDS cuts. So we did the business that we were sent here to do. And at the same time, we cut fat. We cut fat exactly where we could cut it. We had an unprecedented high cut out of the police department that the police department acceded to because they were the right cuts. I think that it is a very difficult job that we do here. But at the end of the day, yes, we need to have police on our streets, and we need to have mental health services, and we need to have a public health hospital. All of these things are the balancing act that we have to do. And I think that we have done the best job that we could do, and look forward to the passage of the budget that is before you. Supervisor Daley, additional motions.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, let's be honest about what happened and what didn't happen in this budget process. There was enormous pressure placed on members of this board. It was generated mostly from Newsom's reelection campaign, which is, I think, illegal. With that said, regardless of where it came from, colleagues, or its political motivation, there was pressure placed on this board. Supervisor Peskin acquiesced to that pressure, and that's fine. Some people engage in this job from looking to sort of navigate treacherous waters with least possible political damage. Other people are here for principle, and that's what I stand on. And I'm comfortable moving forward as long as you'll have me, with different combinations. It seems as if the deal is done. No one wants to touch Daley. Daley's radioactive, and fine. But it doesn't mean that there aren't contradictions in this budget. It doesn't mean that because of a political deal, we're appropriating monies to places that don't need the money, like other things. And it doesn't change the fact that there are cuts proposed, and there are actually layoffs of what I feel are important areas of government work, where people actually rely on these services while there are new hires in other areas. And this is a law and order budget, and some of y'all like that. I don't. And so I'm probably going to vote against it. You're going to vote for it. That's fine. I would make a motion that we reduce $700,000 from the police department. I guess we'll probably have to re-queue or delay hiring or an academy class and reappropriate that $700,000 into the Department of Public Health to avert the elimination of the public health nurses and colleagues on the issue of public health nurses. This is not the first time that this cut proposal has been made by the administration. Probably the third or fourth time we've dealt with it in committee. We've dealt with it through the budget process. It's very frustrating when we get repeated proposed health cuts. So this is the chronic care public health nurses. $700,000 would move. The source be a $700,000 reduction from the police department. The recommended way to do that would be a delayed class.
Motion made by Supervisor Daley. Is there a second for that motion?
So without a second, colleagues, let me say this. You're okay by not seconding this motion, each and every one of you. That's all 10. And if this is okay with you and this is the direction you want to take San Francisco, this is fine. But we have the opportunity right now to say, let's delay the hiring of new police officers and stop the firing of public health nurses. That's the opportunity. That's the motion. I'm looking for a second.
Supervisor Daley, let me just clarify a point of fact. And it is my understanding that we restored one of the two proposed cuts to public health nurses. I believe, if my recollection serves me, that was a restoration in an amount of $378,000 for maternal public health nurses, pursuant to hearings that we had last year that clearly delineated that that was the policy priority of the Board of Supervisors. It is my understanding that the 5.27 vacant full-time equivalent public health nurses, that the 5.27 full-time equivalent public health nurses are not layoffs but are vacant positions. But before you say layoffs, let me just clarify whether or not people are being laid off or whether this is just a numbers game of vacant positions not being funded. Ms. Coloretti, can you clarify that for me?
Thank you. Nani Coloretti, Mayor's Budget Director. It's our understanding, and we talked to the department extensively about this, that there will be no layoffs of public health nurses due to this cut. There are enough vacancies at the department, and these nurses are needed in those positions.
Supervisor Daley, the floor is yours.
Let me retract my statement layoff and say defunding of positions. Colleagues, if you remember from those hearings, public health nurse after public health nurse came forward and talked about the difficulty of convincing nurses to take these positions when it seemed as if these positions were basically being treated as political footballs. I think that this cut proposal would confirm the concerns that were raised in those hearings about the way that the department and City Hall has engaged with the public health nurse program in order to basically make it difficult to recruit for those positions. Remake my motion to delay the hiring of police officers to the amount of $700,000 to restore the positions in the Department of Public Health for chronic care public health nurses. This is a simple motion, colleagues, and if I can't get a second on this motion, then I might as well sit down and vote no and, go to something else that perhaps is more productive than engaging with you 10 colleagues.
Motion made by Supervisor Daley dies for lack of a second on items 4 and additional motion. Supervisor McGoldrick, your name is on the roster.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I would, first of all, let me say that an awful lot of what obviously Supervisor Daley has proposed here, I think many of us are incredibly sympathetic, and I think that we have over the years proven that. And I think that we will continue to visit and revisit a lot of the parts and pieces there as we go forward. As we go forward in the budget, I wanted to pause for just a moment. I wanted to thank in particular everybody involved in it, particularly the 5 members of the committee. But early on in the process, I know one of the things that I think was very important, I was at the AIDS walk the other day, Sunday morning, and I know Supervisor Dufty was there and Supervisor Ellsburn was there, and I know Supervisor Dufty early on made us put the values that are San Francisco values right up there in front in the budget process, and we immediately put that $4 million up for the HIV/AIDS money that certainly the Bush administration still doesn't seem to find to be much of a necessity. And while that money may come later in the year, and I know it's part of the General Fund Reserve money, and we'll see what happens, I think that's one of the very important values that we continue, along with a list of thousands and thousands of items that reflect, I think, the good values of our city that budget committee sent forth to us here. I think what we're looking at here is, on the tweaking on the edges, final sort of touches, dotting the I's and crossing some T's. I have 2 matters I'd like to bring before the board here today. One is the restoration, if you would, by defunding. First, we have to deappropriate in order to reappropriate monies that have to do with the public health nurses. And if you would, excuse me, I have so many pieces of paper. I've been shuffling them. Hang on. Sorry, colleagues. Ay, ay, ay. Okay. Again, I'd just like to move to, and I had tried to find some place where we could find some money that we could move around, because in the end we're moving around the same money. I'd like to actually fund 2 additional chronic care public health nurse positions today. I think the board will be providing with this some continuity to that program. I think that the positions, which you can use whatever term you want, understaffed, not as staffed up as we want, recently vacated, to be filled, whatever phraseology, but I think these are very important existing services, and I think the staff morale issue is a really important issue from having met repeatedly with the staff that comes in. I think it's important that we continue to boost what they do every day for the health of our city. These public health nurses have such essential missions. I think it's something in providing the seniors the health support they need, again, to avoid premature institutionalization and to continue their living at home. And we know how that's basically a dime on the dollar in terms of what it costs us. So I would like to put forth a reappropriation in order to have $244,000 dedicated there, and to deappropriate monies from the website renewal item. The current item is $455,000 of a general fund and $420,000 of non-general fund, for a total of $875,000. In order to gain that monies, which would be the $244,000 general fund for 2 of these public health nurse positions, there is a number of approximately $360,000 which would need to be deappropriated proportionately from the general fund and non-general fund monies there. It's about a 55-45 split in terms of the general fund, non-general fund money. So I would like to put that motion forward, and I think that would be, a very modest, for me, a very modest proposal, I believe.
So let me clarify that motion. That motion is to reduce the general fund portion of the website renewal program, which is both a general funded and non-general funded program, and move that $244,000 to the Department of Public Health for 2 full-time equivalent public health nurses. Is that correct?
That is my motion,
and that
Mr. President.
Motion made by Supervisor McGoldrick and seconded by Supervisor Amiano. And let me just confirm with the controller or the budget shop that there is indeed $244,000 in general fund money in that item.
Supervisor Controller, yes, there is, Supervisor.
On the motion made and seconded, comment from members. Supervisor Ellsburn.
Thank you. I rise against this motion. In committee, we had a very lengthy discussion actually about this line item, about the website design, and I think we even cut some money. I'm sorry, I don't know the exact amount that we cut from the original proposal. But what we did was leave an amount of money that allows us to upgrade our website to make it ADA accessible. This is absolutely necessary funding to allow our website to be more accessible to all San Franciscans, to everyone. Right now, our website is not so accessible. This funding is critical for that purpose. I know it seems easy to just say, oh, website design, no big deal, let's take the money from there. This is for our disabled San Franciscans who need access to our internet. We should just say no to them? I don't think so. It's the wrong place to take money from. It's an inappropriate cut, and I would urge my colleagues to vote no on this proposal.
Thank you, Supervisor. Your recollection matches my recollection from the deliberations that we had in committee, and indeed I do recall a large cut, but then ultimately based on the argument that they needed a minimum amount of money in order to make the website accessible. Maybe, Ms. Coloretti, you can remind the committee what the cut was and what the remaining amount of money was, and indeed confirm the notion that that was an accessibility issue.
Thank you, Supervisor Nani Coloretti, Mayor's Budget Director. The amount cut was $382,000, and the remaining amount that we ended up having of general fund for the website was $605,000, but we did talk about it extensively in committee.
To the motion, Supervisor Alioto-Pierre.
I want to add on to what Supervisor Ellsburn said. I think that when we start talking about public health, nurses in particular, it is very attractive to want to get more of them, and perhaps as many as we could ever possibly have. But what I do want to explain to you, Supervisor Ellsburn touched on the access issue. What needs to really truly be reiterated here, or perhaps said for the first time, is that what accessible websites do for the disabled is that it gives them access to everything about San Francisco and San Francisco government. There are members of the disabled community who cannot come to City Hall, and this acts as their virtual City Hall. It is important, I cannot stress it enough, to ensure that everyone has access. If you ever watch one of the commission hearings on the Mayor's Disability Council, it's really interesting because they will actually take call-ins and people will discuss it. There are a lot of different methods of communication that take place during these committee hearings, and I would suggest that you attend one because they're very interesting to see the way all sorts of different people with disabilities communicate. And so if we also have another issue, which is a real ADA access legal concern. If we don't have a legal website, then we are also subject to ADA lawsuits because we are cutting off certain people from city government and because we are not giving equal access. So this is we have to be very careful here to ensure that we're not also breaking the law by not complying, particularly when it has been brought to the attention of all of us that this is something that we're currently not doing and that this is something that we need to do to maintain access.
Supervisor McGoldrick.
Thank you very much. Mr. Harrington, I wonder if you could help me out a little bit here. It's my understanding that 100% of this money is not, it is not 100% of this money that is all dedicated to disabled access. Is that correct, you know?
Mr. Controller.
Supervisor, I am not the expert on that. I don't know what the components are.
No, my apologies for putting you on the spot. I didn't mean to do that. Perhaps the mayor's office could invade upon this. My understanding is 100% of this money is not for disabled access. Is that correct or incorrect?
Okay, Supervisor Nani-Colorado through the chair. It's correct that not 100% is disabled access, although I'm being told that it's very difficult to separate out the exact amount that is for disabled access because many of the changes are kind of lumped together. So.
Right. So why don't you take a few minutes and maybe with your staff you can sort that out, and I can come back to this in a little while because my staff has been speaking with the parties involved with this, and I think that when we're trying to help seniors who are suffering from all sorts of problems, we're helping disabled. Obviously, it's a very difficult choice for us. Sophie's choice is not where I want to lead us, but it's my understanding that we have a situation here. I don't mean Sophie Maxwell, thank you very much. John Fowles novel, thank you. But if you would, it is important that we get some understanding about what is and what isn't in terms of the disabled community, because I have other places where I can go for this money too, by the way. So if you give me a better figure, I have some places, even some monies that I asked to be added back that I would rather take from something else and give them to this as a higher priority. I'll mention one is the stables out in Golden Gate Park. I would love to have seen more money, but I'm ready and willing to ask that we de-appropriate that and reappropriate that to nurses and a couple other things too.
All right. Well, why don't we return to this issue while they are sharpening their pencils? Supervisor McCreamy.
Sorry, Mr. President, I had another issue which I wanted to raise, and I don't know if it's best to raise it now or not, but I would also like to take out a piece of the budget, and I would like to vote on it separately as a $200,000 item for cameras in the neighborhoods. It is not my intention to vote for that, and I would like to pull that. If I do it now, I'll do it later, whatever's easiest.
You can divide that out, and I will have a separate vote on just that item.
Thank you.
And Supervisor McCreamy, do you have a motion?
Perhaps, but I think I have a question first. I would like to get clarity from either the controller or the mayor's budget office on the psych beds. The figure that has been floating around is $1.3 million that is perhaps needed in order to restore the 14 psych beds in San Francisco General Hospital. Personally, I'm not in favor of the cut of the psych beds at all, but the numbers have not lined up very smartly, I think, whether we're talking about it's an annual number or a 6-month figure. So perhaps if the controller or mayor's budget office can clarify this.
Mr. Controller.
Supervisors Ed Harrington, Controller. The cut was for a 6-month period, and the cut was approximately $1.3 million for the inpatient psych beds. There was a contract with Progress Foundation worth about $1.2 million that would replace those services. So the net change for the 6 months is only about $130,000. If you wanted to leave the Progress Foundation beds and add back the psych beds, it would cost you about $130,000.
You mean if you wanted to?
If you wanted to delete, the Progress Foundation beds and add back at Public Health inpatient, it would be worth about $130,000. If you wanted to leave both services, meaning leave the new beds at Progress and restore the beds at General Hospital, it would be worth about $1.3 million, and that's a 6-month number. So in the second year, it would be worth about 2.6 for a full year. That any clearer?
My preference, strong preference, is that we do both. And I know that it's incumbent upon me to determine where we pull that other 1.3 or 2.6 from, but it makes me incredibly uneasy that we are transferring the position only into sort of the satellite community services and not retaining it in San Francisco General. The impression that I had is that the mayor's office, or that there was an parallel effort going on here to try to restore this. I'm not sure if that's accurate information or not, but I'd like to get verification if that's true, maybe from the mayor's office.
Ms. Colleretti?
Sure, through the chair, Nani Colleretti. The mayor's office is not looking to restore this at the time. This is, as Supervisor Peskin mentioned earlier, a policy call on where the beds should be located. We have talked to a number of people, including Dr. Katz, and believe that this is a good thing to do, which is very high-level clinical services out in the community, so that there are, so that folks that are inside of San Francisco General do not have to stay there longer than they need to be there.
What options do we have to the controller or to you, Mr. President, in terms of us not moving on this particular issue if we're not able to identify the backup funds in order to restore this?
Supervisor, I mean, as we are all clear, the transition is supposed to happen in a half a year, so it certainly gives the Board of Supervisors time to consider whether or not on or before the end of this calendar year, halfway through the fiscal year, additional supplemental appropriations might be considered, whether or not a particular supervisor wants to hold hearings on this and determine whether or not you agree or disagree that this is appropriate medical policy for the city. But this change as proposed in the budget as it now stands would not be effective for 6 more months. So it certainly does provide opportunities for mid-year adjustments if that is the desire of the board.
Okay. Well, I'll second at least the sidebar effort that Supervisor McGoldrick has stimulated on the restoration of the 2 public health nurses. Then I might want to follow up with another motion. And
do you have a motion, additional motion, Supervisor McCready?
Actually, I do. This is sort of on the low side, light side, but I'd like to motion to take $75,000 from the PUC's Water Enterprise Fund and reallocate those funds to Garden for the Environment, which was supposed to occur, but it did not get properly, I think, facilitated.
Motion made by Supervisor Mercarimi, first seconded by Supervisor Ellsburn, and then half of the rest of you. Can we do that, colleagues, without objection on that rather technical motion? While we are waiting for a response to Supervisor McGoldrick, why don't we go on to the redevelopment agency budget? Madam Clerk, could you read item number 6?
Item 6 is a resolution approving the budget of the redevelopment agency of the City and County of San Francisco for fiscal year 2007-2008, approving the issuance by the redevelopment agency of bonds in an aggregate principal amount of not to exceed $128,300,000 to finance redevelopment activities described in such approved budget for fiscal year 2007-2008.
Any comments on this budget? If not, why don't we have a roll call?
Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Sandoval. Sandoval, aye. Supervisor Alioto-Pierre. Aye. Alioto-Pierre, aye. Supervisor Amiano. Amiano, aye. Supervisor Daly. Daly, absent. Supervisor Dufty. Dufty, aye. Supervisor Ellsburn. Ellsburn, aye. Supervisor Jew. Jew, aye. Supervisor Maxwell. Maxwell, aye. Supervisor McGoldrick. McGoldrick, aye. Supervisor Mirkarimi.
No.
Mirkarimi, no. There are 9 ayes, 1 no, and 1 absence.
I didn't get to vote.
There are 9 ayes.
All right. No, I understand that it passes, but you didn't call my name. I didn't vote. Oh, well, I was the first one. Got it. My apologies. The resolution is adopted. Sorry for that momentary lapse. Madam Clerk, could you read the next item?
Item number 7, resolution approving the budget of the Treasure Island Development Authority for fiscal year 2007-2008.
Roll call.
Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Sandoval. Sandoval, aye. Supervisor Alioto-Pierre. Alioto-Pierre, aye. Supervisor Amiano. Amiano, aye. Supervisor Daly. Daly, absent. Supervisor Dufty. Dufty, aye. Supervisor Ellsburn. Ellsburn, aye. Supervisor Jew. Jew, aye. Supervisor Maxwell. Maxwell, aye. Supervisor McGoldrick. McGoldrick, aye. Supervisor Mirkarimi.
Aye.
Mirkarimi, aye. There are 10 ayes.
The resolution is adopted. Next item.
Item number 8. Ordinance authorizing the Department of Economic and Workforce Development to retroactively accept and expend a grant in the amount of $200,000 in fiscal year 2006-2007 from the Private Industry Council of San Francisco.
Any comments? Seeing none, same house, same call. The ordinance is passed on first reading. Next item.
Item 9 is an ordinance authorizing the Department of Economic and Workforce Development to accept and expend a grant in the amount of $5,765,000 $5,765,890 in fiscal year 2007-2008 from the California Employment Development Department.
Same House, same call. The ordinance is passed on first reading.
Item 10 is an ordinance amending San Francisco Administrative Code Section 8.14 by raising the fees for removal of remains, cremation services, and making environmental findings.
Any comments? Seeing none, same House, same call. The ordinance is passed on first reading.
Item 11 is an ordinance amending ordinance number 289-98, establishing the first offender prostitution program fee to allow the Office of the District Attorney to send all eligible prostitution-related offenders to the Department's first offender prostitution program diversion class.
Supervisor McGoldrick.
Thank you very much. I rise in opposition to this item, and I would like to make a motion to refer it back to committee. I believe that the implications of what we are doing here runs very much in the face of our work that was done by this board from the 1996 study that Supervisor Amiano, I know, put forth before any of us were here besides himself. They call for us to examine the role of sex workers in San Francisco and the relationship with our departments in the city in terms of public health, in terms of the police department, in terms of law enforcement, in terms of understandings about those things which would be considered crimes that are victimless and crimes that might have victims. I think that the inability so far of the city to sort out these matters is of such a nature that, in fact, the lack of having applied a policy of understanding here has led to even a greater assault on sex workers, a greater incidence of violence against sex workers, greater exploitation against sex workers, and basically the creation of and the continued existence of a class of people in San Francisco who are in an extremely vulnerable position and I think suffer unduly because of the failure of our city to have actually moved forward on this front. I think that this program is more Band-Aid on top of a problem that is much greater than is recognized here. I think that the actual workers who were actually not involved in the work here at all in terms of the legislation that was created need to be heard from. As you know, with the Department of Public Health in this current year, through the St. James Infirmary, we have set up a hotline system so that we can begin to know what the reality is out there for sex workers. I think just this week we have seen an almost laudatory, unfortunate eulogizing in obituaries about one of the Mitchell brothers who passed away, that we somehow or other say that we're a city that recognizes the role of sexuality and tries to recognize it in a way that is not prescriptivist, but rather is understanding of what the reality of being a human being is about, to put it quite simply, and what some people's realities are and what some people's needs are. And to, I think, somewhat contradictorily, have a situation in which the things like the Mitchell Brothers operation can be seen as part of the historical lore and almost mythological realm of San Francisco, and yet at the same time put forth this kind of legislation, spend this kind of money. I think it's a contradiction that needs to be faced. It's a reality that needs to be faced. I believe that the arrest of sex workers and the way in which sex workers are not recognized in terms of their work is something that San Francisco can lead on. We can look at other countries around the world, Holland, New Zealand, other places. That's important work that still needs to be done. So I would ask if we could please refer this motion back to committee and re-examine what the policies are behind this kind of stuff. So I would make a motion to refer it back to committee. Thank you.
Motion made by Supervisor McGoldrick to re-refer this item, seconded by Supervisor Sandoval. Just as a budget point, this item, Madam Budget Director, is worth how much money and would cause what kind of a hole in the DA's budget? I remember it as being quite small and is probably a rounding error and will not put them out. Mr. Rose.
Mr. President, members of the board, there is no fiscal impact here.
No fiscal impact. Colleagues, given that there is no fiscal impact, can we re-refer this item to committee without objection? That will be the order.
Thank you, colleague.
Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Item 12, ordinance amending Section 128 of the San Francisco Health Code to set patient rates and other services provided by the Department of Public Health, effective July 1st, 2007.
Colleagues, it looks like we have a different House. No, Supervisor Dufty is on the floor. Colleagues, can we do that? Same House, same call. The ordinance is passed on first reading.
Ordinance 13, amending various sections of the Public Works Code to update and codify various permit fees.
Same House, same call. The ordinance is passed on first reading.
Item 14, ordinance making environmental findings and amending various sections of the San Francisco Fire Code to increase fees for certain fire department services and permits.
Same House, same call. The ordinance is passed on first reading.
Item 15 is an ordinance making environmental findings, amending various sections of the San Francisco Business and Tax Regulations Code to increase licensing fees for certain permits issued by the fire department.
Any comments? Seeing none, same House, same call. The ordinance is passed on first reading.
Ordinance making environmental findings and amending San Francisco Park Code, Article 12, Section 12.36, to revise the fee schedule for use of athletic fields.
And Madam Clerk, could you read all of the items through item 23?
Item 17, ordinance making environmental findings and amending San Francisco Park Code, Article 12, Section 12.12, to revise the time for Super Twilight Play, to establish fees for shotgun tournaments, and to authorize the Recreation and Park Commission to approve special promotions. Item 18, ordinance making environmental findings and amending the San Francisco Park Code, Article 12, Section 12.21, to increase the fees for renting clubhouses in San Francisco parks. Item 19, ordinance making environmental findings and adding San Francisco Park Code, Article 12, establishing 12.43, to establish fees for junior and family golf tournaments. Item 20, ordinance making environmental findings and adding San Francisco Park Code, Article 12, Section 12.44, to establish a fee structure for recreational programs. Item 21, ordinance making environmental findings and amending San Francisco Park Code, Article 12, by adding Section 12.45 to establish administrative fees. And item 22, ordinance making environmental findings and amending San Francisco Park Code, Article 12, Section 12.32 to increase the annual fee for San Francisco resident golf cards and from $40 to $45. Item 23, ordinance making environmental findings and amending San Francisco Park Code, Article 12, Section 12.07, to increase the fees for holding weddings in San Francisco parks.
Any comments? Seeing none, same House, same call. The ordinances are passed on first reading.
Item 24, ordinance amending the San Francisco Administrative Code by adding Section 10.100 through 275 to create a retiree health benefits fund.
Same House, same call. The ordinance is passed on first reading.
Item 25 is an ordinance amending the San Francisco Administrative Code to establish the HOPE SF Fund to appropriate $5 million and setting city policy regarding future appropriations to the fund.
Supervisor Jew.
Roll call, please, Mr. Chair.
Roll call.
Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Sandoval. Sandoval, aye. Supervisor Alioto-Pierre.
Aye.
Alioto-Pierre, aye. Supervisor Amiano. Amiano, aye. Supervisor Daly. Daly, absent. Supervisor Ellsburn. Ellsburn, aye. Supervisor Jew. No. Jew, no. Supervisor Maxwell. Maxwell, aye. Supervisor McGoldrick. McGoldrick, aye. Supervisor Mirkarimi.
Aye.
Mirkarimi, aye. There are 9 ayes, 1 no, and 1 absence.
The ordinance is passed on first reading. Next item. And Madam Clerk, could you read items 26 through 31 together?
Item 26 is a resolution approving and authorizing the Director of Island Operations for the Treasure Island Development Authority to execute a second amendment to the sublease with Catholic Charities. Item 27, resolution approving and authorizing the Director of Island Operations for the Treasure Island Development Authority to execute a second amendment to the sublease with Community Housing Partnership. Item 28 is a resolution approving and authorizing the Director of Island Operations for the Treasure Island Development Authority to execute a first amendment to the sublease with the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinics. Item 29, resolution approving and authorizing the Director of Island Operations for the Treasure Island Development Authority to execute a first amendment to the sublease with Rubicon Programs. Item 30, resolution approving and authorizing the Director of Island Operations for the Treasure Island Development Authority to execute a first amendment to the sublease with Swords to Plowshares. Item 31, resolution approving and authorizing the Director of Island Operations for the Treasure Island Development Authority to execute a second amendment to the sublease with Walden House.
Colleagues, Can we do, oh no, we have a different House roll call, please. No, it's, we had a dissenting vote on the last ordinance.
Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Sandoval.
Yes.
Sandoval, aye. Supervisor Alioto-Pierre. Alioto-Pierre, aye. Supervisor Ramiano. Ramiano, aye. Supervisor Daly. Daly, absent. Supervisor Dufty. Dufty, aye. Supervisor Ellsburn. Ellsburn, aye. Supervisor Jew.
Aye.
Jew, aye. Supervisor Maxwell. Maxwell, aye. Supervisor McGoldrick. McGoldrick, aye. Supervisor Mirkarimi. Mirkarimi, aye. There are 10 ayes, 1 absence.
Those resolutions are adopted.
Item 32 is a resolution approving the fiscal year 2007-2008 expenditure plan for the Human Services Care Fund.
Same House, same call. The resolution is adopted.
Item 33 is a resolution transferring jurisdiction of certain real property from the Department of Public Works to the Human Services Agency.
Same House, same call. The resolution is adopted.
Item 34 is a resolution approving disbursements from the Budget Savings Incentive Fund.
Same House, same call. The resolution is adopted.
Item 35 is a resolution concurring with the Controller's certification that services can be performed by private contractor for a lower cost than similar work performed by city and county employees for absentee voter ballot distribution services for the Department of Elections.
Same House, same call. The resolution is adopted. And then, colleagues, why don't we return to items number 4 and 5, and let's see if I can make a friendly amendment to Supervisor McGoldrick's motion. If you would come up here, Supervisor Sandoval, I'd like to trade places with you for a moment. Colleagues, let me first of all rise to make a couple of technical amendments to the earlier technical amendments that I made and the board adopted. You will recall I made a motion to move certain monies for the Immigration and Community Response Network Legal Services from MOCD to the Department of Public Health. I've been informed that they should indeed stay at the Mayor's Office of Community Development, and so would like to make a motion to rescind that part of my earlier motion, and another technical correction with regard to the collaboration for sanctuary outreach and education, that those funds should be moved to the Mayor's Office of Community Development and not to the Department of Public Health. And then, so I'd like to make a motion to do that.
See the second for Supervisor Alioto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then, colleagues, I would like to make a friendly suggestion to Supervisor McGoldrick. As you know, we started today's process with a $10 million add back for affordable housing. $1 million of that the board has voted to move to Buster's Place, which I think is appropriate and is indeed a form of affordable housing and is certainly consistent with the policy direction that the committee expressed and has been adopted by you. We moved an additional $380,000 for aging and adult services, and I would suggest, Supervisor McGoldrick, if you are amenable, that an additional $244,000 come from the same source to cover the 2 FTE public health nurses that you desire to add to the budget.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, thank you very much, and I would ask the Mayor's Budget Director if indeed you would concur that that seems to be something that is fiscally feasible, shall we say, fiscally doable.
The answer is yes.
Very well. Then I would adopt and amend my motion to adopt the recommendation of the friendly amendment made by President Peskin. Thank you very much, colleagues. And well, actually, I'll second. That's the friendly amendment, so I will actually second President Peskin's friendly motion in that direction. Yes, thank you.
Okay, a motion and a second, colleagues. Can we take that without objection?
No,
Supervisor Ellsburn.
Thank you, President Peskin. To the Mayor's Budget Office on this item. This motion to restore these two positions. These are to restore two vacant positions. Is that right? Or are these filled positions?
These are vacant positions, Supervisor.
Okay. Then I'd like to make a motion to amend the motion where if these positions are not filled within 6 months, this money be returned to the general fund reserve. I don't think we should be just funding vacant positions.
Understood.
We should
A
be filling
motion to the motion takes precedent. Is there a second for that motion? Seconded by Supervisor Alioto-Pierce. So let's take them in reverse order. If you would like to comment on that motion, Supervisor McGoldrick.
Just my only comment is I would ask that the Mayor's Office explain why they will not have filled this. If they have not filled it in 6 months, I think we would deserve an explanation, and I would just append that to the comments. Thank you.
Ms. Coloretti.
Is there a motion?
Supervisors, there are a number of vacancies in this classification of the health at home nurses that we've been talking about today. There are 4 filled and 2 vacant. We actually have enough vacancies in the department overall to actually use the other 4 that would have been eliminated in other areas. We need those nurses in other places. So there are net a higher amount of FTEs vacant than you are trying to restore.
So is that friendly? Is that motion to amend your motion acceptable to you? Are you speaking for it or against it?
I've already indicated that I'd like to know why they haven't filled it within 6 months, and then we can revisit this with a mid-year budget adjustment if we need to. Thank you. Well, what I'm saying is if they're telling us they're not filling it, I do not support that. I do not support it, but I would like to know why they haven't filled it within 6 months. But I still support the motion that President Peskin put forward and that I seconded.
Understood. So to Supervisor Ellsburn's motion to amend Supervisor Peskin's motion, which would have the money revert to the general fund if they were not filled in 6 months. A roll call, please.
Supervisor Peskin.
No.
Peskin, no. Supervisor Sandoval. Sandoval, no. Supervisor Alioto-Pierce. Alioto-Pierce, aye. Supervisor Ramiano.
Aye.
Ramiano, aye. Supervisor Daly. Daly, no. Supervisor Dufty. Dufty, no. Supervisor Ellsburn. Ellsburn, aye. Supervisor Jew. Jew, aye. Supervisor Maxwell. Maxwell, no. Supervisor McGoldrick.
No.
McGoldrick, no. Supervisor Mirkrami.
No.
Mirkrami, no. There are 7 noes and 4 ayes.
The motion fails. And then on Supervisor Peskin's motion, seconded by Supervisor McGoldrick, to add 2 public health nurses in the amount of $244,000. Source of funds has been stated. A roll call, please.
Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Sandoval.
I'm sorry, Mr. President. Can you restate that motion?
This is a motion to add 2 public. Why don't we have a motion to rescind the vote made by Supervisor Sandoval, second by Supervisor Dufty without objection. This is a motion to restore 2 of the 5.27 FTE public health nurses, and the source of funds is the add back for affordable housing. On the item, a roll call, please.
Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Sandoval.
No.
Sandoval, no. Supervisor Alioto-Pierce. Alioto-Pierce, aye. Supervisor Ramiano.
Aye.
Ramiano, aye. Supervisor Daly. Daly, aye. Supervisor Dufty. Dufty, aye. Supervisor Ellsburn. Ellsburn, aye. Supervisor Jew. Jew, aye. Supervisor Maxwell. Maxwell, aye. Supervisor McGoldrick. McGoldrick, aye. Supervisor Mirkrami. Mirkrami, aye. There are 10 ayes and 1 no.
The motion is approved.
Through the
and
chair.
We have one other motion on the floor, if we can just do that, and I think we can do it without objection, and that is the technical amendment to the previous amendment that the Immigration Community Response Network Legal Services stays at MOCD, and the Collaboration for Sanctuary Outreach and Education goes from admin to MOCD. Can we do that without objection, colleagues? That will be the order. The motion is approved. Supervisor Ramiano.
Yes, I apologize, but on the motion, I think that was originated with Supervisor Ellsburn, the one before about the nurses, I wanted to vote no when I voted aye. I wonder if we could rescind the vote. So
Second.
Well, then we would have to rescind 2 votes. The vote on the motion that did pass that added the 2 public health nurses.
no, because it was for. I was consistent with the second one.
No, I understand that, but it was a motion to amend a motion that's been approved. So I think we have to, Madam Deputy City Attorney, I just want to do this right. Insofar as it was a motion to a motion and the primary motion has already been approved, would we have to rescind the votes on both?
I don't think so.
Mr. President, Deputy City Attorney Cheryl Adams, I believe you could just make a new motion.
Okay, so Supervisor Ellsburn, would you restate your motion?
Sure. I made the fiscally responsible motion to take any money that isn't expended on vacant positions that just sit vacant for 6 months to put that money into the general fund reserve. That was the motion.
Motion made by Supervisor Ellsburn and seconded by Supervisor Alioto-Pierre. On that motion, a roll call, please.
Supervisor Peskin.
No.
Peskin, no. Supervisor Sandoval. Sandoval, aye. Supervisor Alioto-Pierre. Alioto-Pierre, aye. Supervisor Ramiano.
No.
Amiano, no. Supervisor Daley. Daley, no. Supervisor Dufty.
No.
Dufty, no. Supervisor Ellsburn. Ellsburn, aye. Supervisor Jew. Jew, aye. Supervisor Maxwell. Maxwell, no. Supervisor McGoldrick. McGoldrick, no. Supervisor Mircreamy. Mircreamy, no. There are 5 ayes and 6 noes. Excuse me.
I
Thank
think
you,
it was
colleagues.
7 ayes, 7 noes, and 4 ayes. In any event, the motion to the motion still fails.
Thank you.
So, colleagues, now on items 4 and 5, the annual appropriations ordinance and annual salary ordinance as several times amended. Before we call the roll, we are going to divide out of the annual appropriations ordinance the sum of $200,000 for safety cameras, and that will be the subject of a separate vote as requested by Supervisor McGoldrick. On the balance of the annual appropriations ordinance and annual salary ordinance as amended, a roll call, please.
Can I speak?
Supervisor Daley to those items.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Colleagues, I will be surprised casting a no vote on the budget. And let me just say this as a bit of perspective or a bit of overview is what I see from this chair is what's going on here in the city and perhaps what some of the motivations are. I think that they're different for different or various members here at the board, but I think what we have in front of us, despite what President Peskin contends, it's a budget that does not do justice to those who are most vulnerable. And I think specifically on the issue of affordable housing, colleagues, we've had how many rallies out in front of City Hall? A dozen, 2 dozen since back in 2001 when now I think only a slight majority of us got here, or maybe now not even a majority of us. But probably 2 dozen rallies generally on the issue of affordable housing with the communities who once populated this proud city, including the African American community back in the years shortly after World War II, who made up nearly 40% of San Francisco, now a number somewhere around 6% of San Francisco, colleagues. That's not a decimation. That's like 9 out of 10 getting shown the door. Did you know we're the only major American city that doesn't have an increasing Latino population? Our Latino population is about constant. In every other major American city, the Latino population is increasing. We have a city, colleagues, that had one of the most significant labor actions in the history of this country, the 1934 general strike. San Francisco's history is that of a labor town, and now working class families can't make it here. We have a couple of tools at our disposal, and only a couple of tools to preserve the economic, social, racial, etc. diversity of this city. Building affordable housing is one of our best tools to preserve this diversity and to fight against that economic cleansing that's happening. And it's not an issue that grabs the headlines because there aren't often major displacements. There are minor displacements that happen each and every day. And as that happens, colleagues, this city becomes more white bread. And that might be fine for some, but the San Francisco that I love is a city that is diverse. The San Francisco that I love is a city that looks out for the most vulnerable first. And what we have in front of us, colleagues, is a document that does not do that. What we have is a document that is a Monty Hall budget when we should be passing a Robin Hood budget. We had the choice today, and colleagues, as far as the intentions of the 10 of you, I believe some of you just prefer streets. I mentioned Supervisor Ellsburn, who represents a certain part of the city and a certain political ideology within this city, and he's pretty consistent, colleagues. And I disagree with him almost all the time, but I respect the guy. And then there are some of us colleagues who I think are afraid of the political response. I think there are some of us who are afraid to stand up and deliver in the face of adversity. I think there are some of us who would rather be under our desks than standing here and delivering over a microphone. And I challenge you, colleagues, and I challenge you to find resolve, to find the courage of your convictions, to stand and deliver and to do the right thing and to embrace San Francisco values, because what we've seen here in the previous months is disappointment after disappointment as we test the political winds and find that they're blowing in a direction against diversity. The political winds are blowing in a direction that is decidedly un-San Francisco, and I don't want a part of it.
All right. Any last words before we call the roll on the annual appropriations ordinance and annual salary ordinance? Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Sandoval. Sandoval, aye. Supervisor Alioto-Pierre. Aye. Alioto-Pierre, aye. Supervisor Amiano. Aye. Amiano, aye. Supervisor Daly. Daly, no. Supervisor Dufty. Dufty, aye. Supervisor Ellsburn. Ellsburn, aye. Supervisor Jew? Aye. Jew, aye. Supervisor Maxwell? Maxwell, aye. Supervisor McGoldrick?